The world isn't getting quieter. The pace, the pressure, the opinions, they're only getting louder. The peace isn't found in silence. It's built in the storm. I am Sean Tucker, health scientist, breathwork facilitator, and self-mastery coach. And this is Grounded in the Noise. Real conversations with fighters, healers, and truth seekers about what it really takes to stay calm, clear, and connected. Even and especially when life gets loud. Breathe in, ground down, let's begin. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Grounded in the Noise podcast with me, Sean Tucker, and I'm welcomed by an awesome guest today. Her name is Leilana Grace. She helps guide people into presence and transformation through voice, breath, ceremony, and coaching. Her own personal journey began in 2016 with Shipibo Conibo Healers in Peru, where singing Icaros awakened her voice as a vessel for deep personal and collective transformation. Today, she weaves sound, breathwork, cacao ceremony, and massage into immersive experiences that invite individuals to explore, expand, and step fully into their power. Through her business, Moments in Touch, Leilana holds space of authenticity, connection, and growth, inviting everyone to embody their presence and essence and live fully in the present moment. Leilana, thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Sean. It's so great to be here having this conversation with you.
Yeah, I'd love actually to start this conversation at that moment, because I probably mispronounced and sort of missaid the experience that you had in Peru. Can you walk us through what that was for anyone who doesn't know what that is? Yeah, tell us a little bit about what happened.
Sure. We're starting right from the start. That's great. So 9 years ago, I embarked on a healing journey into central Peru in a little place called Paoyang on the Ucayali River with the Shipibo Conibo people. They're curanderos, so they're healers. The healer that I studied with is a man named Papa Gilberto Mawa. And I stayed there for many months at a time. I had 2 different visits. And this is a place that I started to learn deeper with the natural world. So I started to learn the ways of the Shipibo healers and the way that they would commune with the natural world and learn how to facilitate different transformational experiences with the plants as allies. So studying the energy of the plants.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds incredible. It sounds really enlightening in many ways. I guess for a few moments, I'd love you to speak into what was the thing that drew you to Peru?
Well, so there was quite a few different reasons why I went to Peru. So I was very close to a particular plant that started to come into my dreaming world. And at this point in my life, I was experiencing some deep trauma from quite an abusive relationship that I tried different healing modalities and they were helping, but I knew that there was something that I needed to work on, something deeper, a deeper level of healing that would help me to really shift through all of that trauma. And I just knew that Peru was the place that I needed to go. I also had a really dear sister there studying already, so I had a safe place to go to. Yeah, so luckily for me, it was already weaving into my dreams, and I knew where I needed to go, and I arrived there safely. And it became a very, very immersive experience. As I said, I stayed there for many months, and I really immersed into the culture and into a couple of families.
Wow.
Particularly, yeah.
Sounds like you were led there, you were called there, right, through your dreams. And what was that like? Was that scary at any point where it was like, what's happening? I mean, in the lead up to knowing what it was all about, or?
No, I would never say that it felt scary. It's a deep knowing, right? It's a
Yeah.
deep knowing that that's where I need to go. And I can't say that I really had the funds to do it, but I made it happen. And I just knew that that was the only path for me at that point in time in my life. And I did everything that I needed to make that happen.
Yeah.
And there was this really beautiful point actually after 3 weeks of being in the Amazon with the shaman. I had only planned to actually be there for the 3.5 weeks. The shaman went to Mexico and I went to a little place deeper in the jungle. I had a really profound dream and I woke up out of that dream and I just knew that I couldn't even go home. My healing hadn't finished. I'd
Mm.
only really just started peeling back the layers, and I went back to the Amazon and I just continued to stay there until I felt like it was right to leave.
Wow. That's incredible. And I'm sure many people that are tuning in, they might be receiving those messages, right? We are magnets of it, of the people that need us and the people we need in our lives as well, right? So it's interesting that some of these people they might have the person or the thing or whatever it is, the vision knocking at their door. But when you really know and you really trust, right? I think the element that's probably coming through for me from you is that you trusted it. And we're so conditioned in society, I believe, to not trust these things because they are almost out of this world. If you tried to explain that to someone, I had this vision and I just know that I need to go to Peru, they'll call you crazy, right?
Hmm.
Did you speak about it with many people or did you just do it?
No, actually, Sean, I've only just in the last few months decided that it's time to start sharing my story a little more. I feel it took about 7 years to integrate the experience. The last couple of years, I have completely grounded myself out. And now I feel that the charge of any of the trauma of my story or the levels of safety that I felt to speak out around why I went to the Amazon now feels completely safe and okay to do so within my being and my body and my environment. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's
Well,
really important to share my story to help
yeah.
to inspire and encourage other people to lead from their heart.
Well, I'd love to, if it's okay, to open up that a little bit and give our viewers and listeners a little bit of an insight into like what was the trauma specifically that you had to that you physically were a victim of. Like go into as much or as little detail as you like, because I think this is a really powerful story that you have to share, right? And a lot of people they might get the call, but they don't take the call. And you were someone that did take the call. And now you're in a place where you can truly help impact and guide these people home. Right. No, I think
Sure.
it's truly powerful.
So, as I said, I was in an abusive relationship. Was well, there was quite an age difference between me and the man that I had gotten into a relationship with, and we were together for 9 years. And so that was like 16 until 26, I was. So, they were really formative, the formative years of my life and the development of me becoming a young woman. And there were points that I've been reflecting on that I really could feel that I needed to leave that relationship. But
Yeah.
the fear of the change, I decided I would stay in that space because the fear would override what my heart was telling me to do. And eventually the fear of staying the same actually was scarier than the thought of leaving. And
Yeah.
so when it came to that point and I was like, no, this isn't right for me, this isn't my fullest potential. I've got so much more that I have to offer to the world or to my friends or my community. And this isn't healthy. I ran. I literally ran. And that was the only way to get out of the situation that I was in.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's been an incredible journey to now reflect back on, in the sense of I can really acknowledge the level of abuse that I was experiencing in that relationship. When you're in it, sometimes you kind of, you tend to, well, I was just giving that impression to my friends and my family that everything was okay, that I
Yeah.
was living this perfect life.
And
And sorry, yeah.
yeah, I was going to ask, when it comes to abuse, and especially when it's, domestic abuse, kind of like what you're detailing, was it all elements of abuse? Because abuse comes in many shapes and different forms, right? Like there's emotional abuse, there's mental abuse, there's physical abuse, there's financial abuse, there's social abuse. Like what kind of abuse was it for you that was just, I don't know, there's an element of people that are abused. And I'm not saying that this is the case for you at all, but
Mhm.
there's obviously Stockholm syndrome is a thing, right?
Mhm.
It's like there's comfort in being abused. And this is like, it's a disease. It's really quite strange phenomenon that occurs. And I think a lot of people are a bit kind of sadistic in many ways. They like to have the suffering on them, but there's a time where it comes where you get to choose how you want to live your life.
Mhm.
Right? You don't just go through suffering just to suffer. It's like you go through suffering because suffering is a form of grace
Mhm.
to help you extract purpose and meaning, which is why I think, your story is so empowering to probably a time in Australia, especially where there's so many males and like women, especially, but there's also men as well that are being abused in so many different ways, not knowing how to get out because there's just so much comfort and certainty in the current situation they have. So I'd
Yeah,
love, yeah, what kind of, obviously it was pretty severe, right? It was pretty severe, but could you give us a little bit more detail on what type of abuse it was in your case?
sure. So there was levels of it was mostly mental abuse, but there were levels of physical abuse and emotional abuse and spiritual abuse. So but when I think of the young woman who entered that relationship at the sweet age of 16, I was so full of light and wisdom at that point. And I remember people coming to me for advice at that age. And people
Mm,
would always say to me, "You're so wise, beyond your years." And when I think of the young woman who came out of that relationship, I was essentially dimmed down. My light felt like it was sucked out of me. And if it wasn't for the support, having a supportive family that were ready to take me back in, it would have been very, very difficult for me. And luckily, there wasn't so much, say, per se, sexual abuse. So luckily, I had some money behind me to embark on some adventures that would start to help me to refill my cup and to help me to start finding my identity again, finding who I am because I was very lost. I think of it as being a child coming out of the rainforest. I lived on 500 acres of rainforest. And in the end, so I was in a very isolated environment, right? I was
yeah.
isolated from my friends, my family. I grew up in a very stable household. And in that isolation, the one thing that kept me grounded, the one thing that made me feel safe was the environment, was the jungle. I was so connected with the jungle and the nature around me. In the morning, I would wake up and I would take my cup of tea down to the river and I would be with the river and my dog. And, I would lay in the river and I felt okay. I still felt whole because I was
Yeah.
so in love with that land, the richness of that land and the energy of that land. And my mother had actually said to me, she said, you have to understand that it's not so much that you are in love with this person anymore. You're more in love with the land. So I had to make that
Oh,
really conscious decision at that time that, yes, I had to leave that land. And once I made that decision, I was able to also detach from my partner at that point as well. And, I think at that age, I did the best I could with the tools that I had. It always comes down to that. And, it's also that compassion, I think, for us as human beings, we are also very empathetic towards other people's situations. And when we get ourselves into these abusive relationships, we tend to we want to be that savior. We want to be that person, that the stability for that person and what it is that they're going through, and having compassion for their life experiences as well, and helping to rise them up and raise them up as well with us. But sometimes the weight of somebody else's trauma is just something that we cannot hold if we don't have the right tools or life experiences to hold them.
yeah, it's very, very true. And I'm glad you brought that into the space because there's so many people that are trying to save others, right? And I think it's so true in the healing space that you actually can't save anyone. Like, it's such a misalignment of energies, first and foremost. But it's also, if you were to truly take on someone's trauma and rearrange their life energies within yourself, like, what kind of damage is that going to do to yourself? Like, what potentiality does that have to work against your own life energies, right? Because it sounds like you're so deeply connected to nature, and nature has a way of like recalibrating and grounding and just revitalizing you. And I think the pathway to show people forward is like, this is what I do. Like, the healing comes from the forests. The healing comes from the plants. It doesn't come from, it's coming, like, it's helping me reorganize my own self. It's reorganizing my DNA, my life energy, so that, you know, whatever has gone and happened in my life, like, I'm no longer a victim because I'm part of this life and this life is part of me.
Mm.
And guiding people through that process, I think, with the activations and the things that you bring now and the things that have happened in the life experience for you, which is probably a really key part that I think I love for you to speak into as well. Because when you're at that really ripe age of, let's say, naivety, like vulnerability, not knowing what the next steps are, because at that age, you kind of feel like you know everything.
Mm-hmm.
Life is already figured out for you because you have all your gifts. Like, you're pretty in tune. I do remember even in myself, like, there's this connection that you have within yourself and to nature and to life and animals and all that stuff. But the thing that can get in the way is the people that will take advantage of that vulnerability that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, in many cases, you have to let it happen because you have no control over it. It's part of your life journey to let that experience happen and unfold so that you can help others reconnect and rejoin back to their own, authentic selves and their own home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how much has that life experience, I guess, of the trauma really made you a better person today? But also, what has it done in terms of being able to guide others as well?
Well, it's something that, as challenging as it was to have that experience for such a long time in my youth,
Mm,
I feel that, it's not something that I regret in that sense. I feel like it's a life experience that my soul essentially had to go through. And I understand the deeper layers and reasons for that ancestrally now as well, after embarking on a journey over to the UK, an ancestral journey. So I feel that, that the experience has, as low as it took me, it gave me an opportunity to build myself back up and to really look at how I could transform the negativity of the experience into positive outcomes and lessons for me to be able to grow and to transform into an even better version of myself every single day. It's like, how do we take away from these negative experiences to actually find the positivity out of it? I think that that's something that really grounds me as well and keeps me really centered, is that we've all got our stories, and we're all facing different challenges and, adversities in life. And I think that there's always something to learn from it. There's always an angle that we can look at it to learn from, so that we can take our next step with confidence, even if the road ahead looks overwhelming, and knowing that from a place where potentially we might feel lost is an opportunity to redirect ourselves onto a path that's more aligned for us as well. And that these life situations that may present actually just the catalysts for us to be able to step into a more fulfilling life and to live with more meaning and more purpose.
yeah. Well said. I think it's so true, because there's an element which I'd love to lean into a little bit more, and like, how important is that aspect, or that moment of being lost and feeling lost? how much has that impacted your journey? And how important do you think it is as a learning experience for others?
Sure. How has it impacted my journey? When I think of those points now, it actually is kind of exciting because, as I just
Mm,
said, it's an opportunity to look at like where can I go now? I'm not on this, linear path, and I'm the creator of my life. And, what decision am I going to make that's really going to, um, yeah, just to create something more positive for myself. And so what was the next question?
so how important do you think that is for others to use it as a learning experience?
Yeah, sure. So I think just one thing that comes to mind is that, like looking, it's really important to look inside of ourselves, but also to look outside of ourselves in the sense of who are the teachers around us in this point in time? Or who is it that I can seek out that I'm most resonant with that's going to help me get from A to B, and there's a lot of people that I can look back on in my life, particularly that aren't with me anymore, but they definitely are key people who have held little nuggets of gold of wisdom, and they've helped me to get from A to B.
Mm,
And they're always around us, whether they're people or they're animals or it's nature. There's always a teacher. There's always a teaching waiting for us. And I think that that's really important too. In these spaces where we feel a little lost, it's just to have a look around and just to feel like who's a good role model for me right now. Who is somebody that I can look up to that's going to get me to that place that I know that deep inside of me I really want to go there, but it feels overwhelming. You know, I think that person, that's my person, and I'm gonna ask them, or I'm gonna get them to hold my hand for a little bit, and
mm,
that's okay. I think that there was a point also, in my early 20s where I was like, no, I've got to do everything on my own. Actually, there's still a bit of an element of that, this lone wolf. And I'm like, I've got to do it all on my own. But the most empowering thing for me is actually just to also to reach out and just say, hey, I don't have this right now. And could you show me?
yeah. Because the question, I think we get out of life the questions that we ask, right? In many
Mm,
ways. And it's having the willingness to ask a question that we maybe not don't even know what the question is we're going to ask.
mhm.
And I think it's that element of feeling lost. And I think because in Western cultures, it's so easy to want to not feel lost. And I think there's such a causation model happening now with mental health, right? So many people are lost and disconnected and all of these things. But if you go over to more of the Eastern sort of traditions and the places where they're deeply connected to nature, is like lost is part of the process. Being lost is part of the process, right? It's like finding the stillness. It's finding that place of quiet, because if you don't know what question to ask, it's because you're looking in the wrong place.
Yeah. And I think also, apart from asking questions, something that I've also been reflecting on a lot is when I was in the Amazon, a really integral part of the experience is that you stay in silence and isolation,
Yeah.
and you listen and you listen. What's coming through? What is coming through from, well, for us in that space was communing with the plants. So learning to listen to the natural world, to listen to the plants, to listen to the teachings coming through, but also, like what is our higher self trying to bring through for us as well,
Mm,
and not always seeking for the answers. I think we're also brought up here in the Western world to be given the answers all the time. And I think that is really important also to have that quiet space of reflection, to listen, to give ourselves that space to ground
yeah.
and to be silent, to be quiet and to listen and to let the stress of the mind dissolve so that we can hear what it is that's trying to come through, whether it's with the elements, even, the wind, the water, the earth, the fire. There's many ancient traditions that draw their wisdom from these spaces and these places. And it's really important for us in this modern world and culture, especially as we are very distracted in the vast amount of noise that's coming in and information, especially in the digital landscape, to get back with nature and just to simply listen, grounded in this body, grounded in the earth, and to listen in that quiet space within ourselves.
Mm.
And the teacher, there would be these points. My teacher, he would be out and he'd be on his hands and knees with a machete. And, we'd have our ceremonies every second night. And he would be out with his machete during the day just to get some quietness, just to get some solitude and some time away from the dieteros and from his family. And he wasn't even cutting anything half the time. It was just like these really small, thin blades of grass. I knew that that space and time, though, was his space of reflection and therapy and his own meditation. And that's when you didn't disturb him. And I remember also that, he would get really frustrated with dieteros or, the foreigners coming in and asking so many questions, wanting him to make sense of their visions and their dreams and their experiences. But it's not about him interpreting those experiences. It's actually about us being able to sit in our own experiences and learning how to bring positive meaning into the experiences that we're having to move forward on a path of growth and expansion.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost the dissolution, the dissolving of the question.
Mm.
Because when you do listen, it's like there's another question coming through. It's not you asking the question, but it's almost like challenging your own sense of self, your beliefs, your identity, that story of who you think you are. And I think when you do find those quiet spaces, and then this is why having a daily discipline, a practice that you do every single day is so important to keep you grounded through the noise and in the noise, because chaos is everywhere. If you just look at in your own day, not even look at you playing in the role that you play in society, but just look at the 24 hours a day that you spend. I'm sure there's moments where it's just pure, utter chaos. And so I guess the question I'd love to ask here is like, what kind of structure do you have that keeps you grounded throughout your day, Leilana?
Yeah. Well, I would say the ones that I've narrowed it down to that really work for me, because on this road of personal development and health and wellness, I've, explored many different areas and it's just not possible to fit them all into your day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Many different
Well said.
practices. So the ones that work for me, and I alternate to keep it, to keep it interesting. My day looks like waking up and dropping into whether it's simply a cold shower, or if it's space in that really soft gentleness when we're waking up, to start to think about what it is that I'm creating. I straight away, the very first thing in the morning, every morning actually, is I will meditate on what it is that I'm bringing to life, because it's the most programmable space for me personally, for mindset. And then yoga or Pilates, going for a walk, singing, my sound healing, breath work. So those are the types of things that I'll do, either waking up, or I'll integrate them through the day, just to, as I'm also moving into the online world more, it's a good way to ground out of the digital space and just to give myself a block and some space where I go back to nature, or I integrate one of these practices.
Yeah, I think it's the structure of how you start and finish a day, I feel like is the two most important meeting points, because they do really keep you centered through that space of and time where it is the middle is the chaos,
Mm,
right? So we do have times where our mind's more, let's say, even vulnerable, maybe, or susceptible to like subliminal messaging and all this kind of stuff, and like reprogramming yourself. So I think what you shared there is insanely valuable. And for those listening and those viewing, like, pay attention to the subtleties of what she said, of what Leilana said, making it almost a little bit different. So you've got a few different things to select from to keep it exciting and fruitful for yourself, because variety is the spice of life. But also the consistency. There's probably not many days where you would skip your practices, or you wouldn't go probably more than a week or two like without them, I'm sure, right?
no, definitely not. Definitely not. I always integrate something, even if it's 3 minutes, because it's that positive reinforcement within
Yeah.
our being that is the most important, So instead of completely skipping it because well, for me personally, if I'm finding it challenging and I think to myself, oh, I can't be bothered,
Yeah.
Push through that, and I just sit down and I do my 3 minutes of breathing, or I sing a 3 minute song, or I have that cold shower. And afterwards, like, oh, yes, I did the thing. I showed up and I still committed to my practice. It was only 3 minutes, but then it's that, right? That positive reinforcement, and your body just lights up and it resets the self.
And you always fall to the level of training that you put yourself through, right?
Right.
Very cool. There's one question I'd love to ask Leilana before we kind of close up today's podcast episode. And that is something that I've brought to life on my other podcast, but I'll ask it in a different way. In the moment where you felt, I guess, really lost and probably most susceptible to some of the abuse and stuff that you were going through, at what age do you feel like it was in particular for you? So when I interviewed another guest, they said it was when they were 16, right? What wisdom or what words of advice would you impart to yourself, knowing the experience and the wisdom that you've gone through to get to where you are right now?
At what age?
At what age? Yeah, for you.
I think it would be 16 for me as well, because I feel like that was a real turning point. Yeah, a real turning point of coming into a woman. And the words of wisdom,
Yeah. What would
yeah,
you tell yourself?
I would tell myself that it's okay to journey and experience sections of life on my own, and that I'm never actually alone, and that life is so full of opportunities that are just waiting to be embraced. So embrace life at every day,
Yeah.
every
That's
moment.
so, so true.
Mm.
So true. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank
And
you for
lastly,
asking that question.
you're welcome. Before we close up, I'd love for you to share just like how can people find you when, they're looking on social media? What is the thing that you're offering out into the world? And two, what's your handles? What's the best platform to find you?
Sure. So, well, I'm a multifaceted facilitator, and I offer breath work for transformation. I offer massage. I offer sound healing, and also different elements of energy work, different modalities of energy work for transformation, for life transformation. And the thing that's really lighting me up at the moment is that I am going online. I've been holding my group spaces for 8 years now with cacao ceremonies as another way that I integrated my work from the Amazon when I came back to Australia. So cacao ceremonies, and yeah, so I've been holding group spaces here in North Queensland for 8 years, and I'm taking my services, and I'm taking myself online, which has been a huge step for somebody who loves being grounded in nature. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so I'm really excited to be now offering transformational journeys for periods of time. So if that's something that anybody is interested in, or called to speak to me a little more about, they can find me on my socials at Leilana Grace, or at Moments in Touch is my small business, and my website www.momentsin touch.com.au.
Amazing. I'll make sure I link all of the links and the handles in the show notes of this podcast episode. And just once again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for going to the place that you did. I know it's going to be immensely valuable for those tuning in. So thank you again. Thanks for being
Yeah.
here.
Thank you so much, Sean. It was a really beautiful conversation, really special to open up my heart in this space.
Yeah. Thanks again. And if you
Yeah.
like this episode, please subscribe, and make sure you tune into the next episode. Take care and have a wonderful week. See you later. Thanks for tuning in to Grounded in the Noise. Remember, peace isn't passive, it is power. Stay grounded, even in the noise.